Welcome back, listener. You are listening to the Friday Council, your home for free thought and purposeful discussion on our human condition and all interesting aspects of modern living. If you share in our desire for new ideas and self-improvement, relax your body and contemplate alongside us. Now on the Friday Council.
Welcome back to the Friday Council podcast, episode 26.
That's a lot of eppies.
Yep, we're getting there.
Half a
Wrap 'em
year.
up.
Half a year, yeah.
True, yeah. Weekly, if you're doing it weekly, that is half a year.
We just witnessed some epic nature, as much nature as you can experience in a residential area, basically. The cat's gone all startling and chasing off into the fence, and they were after some little bird that can barely fly. And so just before we started recording, saved that little bird, got it in the towel. We put it up in a tree somewhere. The cats are being retarded. They're still looking in the original spot. And then we were just all instantly thinking about intervention, specifically with nature, but you have a story as well that you can tell in a bit about intervening. But what also came to mind after saving that bird was the fact that somehow my conscience is clear. Even if the bird's going to die anyway in the other tree, I've moved it to another tree, given it a few seeds that I feed the chickens, so it's kind of on its own. And maybe I'm lucky in the fact that my conscience is completely clear there. If it can't fly, it's going to die sooner or later, which is brutal.
But you've released that, I guess, responsibility off yourself. It's like, I've played my part.
Yeah.
Now nature's going to take its course.
It is a bit hypocritical though, because then like, why didn't I just let nature take its course and let those cats eat that bird? But cats are kind of fucked in that they'll torture it for a bit, which is no good.
Yeah, cat. Well, I don't know if you're a dog or a cat person, but I always thought cats were psychopaths.
Yeah, definitely. Even if you're a cat person, you got to admit that.
Probably offending a whole lot of people here.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm not.
50-50.
Yeah, just not a cat fan.
But yeah, talking about intervention and when to intervene. Do you want to tell your story on intervention?
So it's not specifically nature related, but one afternoon, probably 2 or 3 months ago, outside a lawyer's office, saw, that's a side detail, just signing paperwork. Anyway, there's an altercation between a man and a woman where the woman was screaming out, "Help me, this man's trying to steal my bag." She was saying, he was replying like, "Whoa, you've got my smokes, like give me my smokes back." Probably a bit more expletive than that. And so there's a crowd forming around, kind of, what's going on here. You don't see this every day. Mm-hmm. And so me and this other guy, we kind of like went up to the guy, like, "What are you doing?" And just like, "Let go, it's only like cigarettes." Obviously to him means the world. But yeah, so it's like, "What are you doing? Like, it's not worth it." And so someone else was calling the police. It's like escalating. So it's like, do I stay here and let it run its course, or should I be intervening? And naturally, my first thought was that the man was in the wrong because he was trying to snatch her bag. Well, that's what it appeared so. But then these other two people came from down the road from the bus stop where I think it originally started, saying that the woman was the one who was like taking his things. And so what do you believe? It's like, and how do you intervene? Like, how far should you go into a situation?
Yeah.
Or just let it go?
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I'm ready to throw down if I have to, but I mean, obviously I'm not one to try and
without
get into
the full story.
Yeah, you don't want to just.
But then someone else could come. The people before the bus stop could also come and be like, "Nah, he did. It was him first."
Yeah, well, that's exactly that.
That's a good lesson, isn't it, for spin and like media spin.
Thankfully, there were 2 cop cars that arrived like within a minute. Like it was that quick. Must have been patrolling the area, and I thought, yeah, they're here. Wait a few minutes, see if they want to ask any questions, but it's not my problem. I'm released from this.
I suppose, like I was saying before, with my conscience being, I feel like I'm released from that. I couldn't bear to, I could bear, but I wouldn't have liked to just watch them slowly hunt that thing down and torture it over an hour, when at least I've given it another chance. I guess you're kind of just guided by your own intuition, which you don't really have a choice about. And in that situation, you obviously you were ready, but you didn't have enough information to throw down. So
yeah, I mean, it's different. I guess when it comes to humans, we're probably more, I don't want to say logical is the right word, but we generally want to know more information before we formulate an opinion or, just decide. Whereas in nature, it's kind of like every man for himself, herself, whatever, creature for themselves. And I don't know, I find it like myself sometimes if you come across videos of like animals fighting each other or like in the wild, it's kind of like quite interesting and cool. But to what point do you step in?
Yeah, there's that rule in I know of a rule in all the nature documentarians is the rule of non-intervention, where no matter what, basically, I think it's no matter what, they won't intervene filming anything, as tragic and heartbreaking as it may be. I know the BBC one, the Arctic one with the polar bears, caught a lot of flack from people like the Facebook army, a real high IQ Facebook army, criticizing the documentarians for not doing something about the sad polar bear shots. They were probably all seen them on that iceberg that's real tiny, just floating.
Oh, right, okay.
And they say, there's a million chances for a nature documentarian to intervene, and when something's something small and fluffy, or
can you explain? Like, was it just what was happening in the?
It was just a shot designed to elucidate the point of like global warming.
Gotcha.
And so it was just showing some polar bear floating. They can swim, but it was floating on this like tiny little ice island, like in the vast ocean. It was like it's zooming.
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, if you're watching it, it's quite. You would think it's alarming, like what's going on. But to what point could the camera people actually intervene? Like they're not going to take it from its habitat.
Another cat doing something.
Yeah,
I agree. I was going to say something else about intervention.
I'll just say, David, do you have any experiences or anecdotes of times where you've seen anything?
Not off the top of my head. I would take it's really going to depend on a case by case basis, but I generally tend to stay out of.
Yeah, you want to be the guy filming what's happening as opposed to actually being a part of it.
It's just one of those things where, and everyone does this to an extent, although most people won't admit it. But if we take like a large scope view, if we think like all the wars going on at the moment in the world, you can't influence them, or you can't really influence them. So there's like an infinite number of intervenable situations occurring on any given day in the world, and you can't intervene in all of them, and in fact you can't intervene in many of them. So I just tend to take the view, stay out of
defeatist.
No, I
just do what you can.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something real clear cut, maybe I'll intervene. But often it just ends up, especially with humans.
Rude. Oh, that's probably Greenpeace.
Greenpeace. What are they wanting?
Donations.
What
do you think?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to.
Yeah, with humans, it just it so often ends up extremely messy. So if we take, I can't think of a great example off the top of my head, but you get involved in an argument or whatever between two people, then you are now part of that trouble, and it won't like end today. Maybe like a good example of that would be if someone's in trouble with like a gang or something, and then you try and save them. Well, now you're an enemy of that gang as well, and that's going to last for a while. It's one of those things, and it's very, I guess, Machiavellian would be the word for it. Is I can't save you. So I'm sorry, but you might get killed by the gang. But I'm not going to get. Otherwise, we're both going to get killed by the gang.
Yeah. This was what I was going to say. Was how the internet kind of, that's an definite L from the internet, is being aware of all these immense amounts of world scale tragedies and feeling your conscience tells you to want to intervene.
Yeah.
Normally, if that was happening locally, you would intervene, but you can't help feeling that. And I feel, in my experience, with I think women being generally more empathetic, as a feminine trait, I feel like they struggle, and the women closely in my life, they're really negatively affected by a lot of those tragedies, and my masculine
Is it safe to drink?
like logically talking it, like pushing it aside, be like, you can't do anything, and that's fine for me. It doesn't help at all. It actually infuriates them. So yeah, I don't know what to do about that, but other than some deep self-work, I guess, you got to get over it one way or another.
Well, I mean, I think in that situation, let's say if you take into, I think maybe a good example currently would be like the earthquakes that have happened in Turkey and Syria. And it's one of those, it's a horrible, horrible disaster where, I don't know what the toll is now. I think last time I saw it was over 50,000, which is so hard to comprehend. I mean, you look at like a stadium of people and you're like, well, that's how many people have died. And obviously there'll be rebuild going on, and people try and like build back their lives, people dispersed, having to move to different places, etc. And yeah, the natural thing is like, how do I help? Like, you know, I want to help. How do I help? But there's only so much you can do. But not to say that everyone should take that approach. It's like, well, if nobody does anything, then nothing's going to get done. But another thing is like when a tragedy happens in like a GoFundMe, well, maybe it's not the best example because it can be case by case, but like the cyclone as well that we've had in the North Island, like the relief fund, people trying to raise money, and it's like, well, like it's a good thing, and there's money being generated, but like it's barely gonna take a mark off the actual cost.
Those big charities as well, I know, have been pinged for some questionable assortment of their funds when you do donate, and the World Vision ads and whatnot. The big charities, they're often the biggest charities often give the least dollar value, like by the time it gets down to the actual people.
I think as well, just in terms of that, marketing becomes very problematic around disasters and events. It's very easy
to capitalize on.
And I've found like myself in certain times in social media, like advertising can really like pull on your heartstrings. Even just a generic video, like this can be played or portrayed in a way to tug on your heartstrings and to make you feel a sense of like empathy or whatever. But like, there's only so much you can do as an individual. So I think, what are we doing?
I think it'll mess up the people. It doesn't have to be all women, but mainly women in my experience that are really affected by that in an empathetic way. But then I think it also is an L for people more like me and maybe yourself, David, it sounds like, where it makes us more indifferent to that stuff. It's like, it's just another one. And you can get too cynical on one side, you know. You got to play a kind of painful balance that's going to take some work. It's going to take effort and it's going to be slightly painful, but you don't want it too painful. It ruins your life and ruins your whole day. But you don't want to be so indifferent that it gets to the point where you just like, you're walking past homeless people in your own city and you're going,
that's a good point.
There's a million people in Syria dying right now. Why should I give you
it just made me have a think just now. We talked about earlier in one of the podcasts about like how naturally we're more tribalistic. So we come from smaller tribes, or generally, you know, if you have friends or whatever, you're more likely to have more intimate friends with a smaller number of people as opposed to, I don't know, your generic Facebook friends, whatever. So maybe this isn't the right thing to prescribe to, but generally I would be more willing to support or help those people who are nearest and dearest to me in life. So if you've got like close friends that are struggling financially, I'd probably feel more likely to help. But when something big happens, like yeah, you can donate money to a fund, but like, I think I'm seeing firsthand, like, my giving or whatever is going to a need that I can actually see firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and that's, I think you look after your family first, and then you've got your close friends. But in big environments, like, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't know if that's the right way to look at it.
I think that's the right way to look at it. Focus on the people closest to you. That's I think it's really all you. In my opinion, that's like all you can do. Because as I say, there's an infinite number of disasters outside your circle. So it's like, how do you know it's right to give? How do you justify giving to this one over that one? So I think focus on
That's the way.
that, and then you can take that to like community level. So if it's like your city.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to be a matter of opinion, and you're going to be guided by your own conscience.
Yeah, of course, it's a matter of opinion. So if you don't have to, but that's the way.
What do you guys think about? There's that charity that is very rational. It's like super rational, and they change what they donate to just depending on the amount of lives you can save. So for each dollar you can spend. So at the moment, it's like buying mosquito nets is like the most cost-effective way to save one life.
And that's like something that no one, or very little people have heard about. You've heard about the war in Ukraine and donating and volunteering there, but you haven't heard, like, it's so, because you don't directly associate that with death. You associate war, guns, people dying. You don't associate mosquito bites and countries with malaria and death. And
this website, takes all the guesswork out. They're constantly reevaluating and readjusting.
And I've like given this example of war before. Everyone cares about the war in Ukraine at the moment, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't if you feel the need to, but there's a bunch of other wars going on and have been wars that are far worse. I think it's these countries, they'll become a bit of a blur to me, but I think it's Ethiopia that's got a civil war going that's been going for at least 5 years, and at least 500,000 people are dead. So on a total death scale, it's far more deadly than the war in Ukraine, but nobody really cares about Ethiopia. But, why do we put value on Ukrainian lives and not Ethiopian lives? But, most people have some stupid way of, like, justifying that. I can't,
It's got to be, we don't necessarily choose what wars we hear about. That's chosen for us. And there'll be a reason that that's ultimately chosen for us, I think. Some obvious political importance to America, which we're basically
probably
a cuck for America. We do whatever America does, essentially, I think.
And and another argument also is, if we are using the examples of wars, you can get involved, and if we take this to on a mass scale, like America's been you can pick out a bunch of other countries as well, but America's the obvious one who loves to intervene in wars ever since World War II. And most of it doesn't end well. Obviously, the most recent example being Afghanistan, where they were there for 20 years, and then they pull out, and within a day, the Taliban's back in control. So it's like they very well might, even though I'm sure they would have had their own self-interest there, resources and stuff like that, political control and strategic control in the Middle East, but that was beneficial for the everyday people of Afghanistan who had some freedom, basically, but it was unsustainable. So you had a whole bunch of people who got a taste of living, free life, and it gets taken away from them, which I think is probably worse than having just lived under oppression all of your life, because now there's that contrast.
Well, the argument, should the US have even gone into Afghanistan in the first place?
And that's what I mean. They might have good intentions, but you often can have good intentions and it just doesn't work. It, in often cases, makes it a hell of a lot worse. And that maybe a better example would be earlier than that, Afghanistan again, when America first got involved or indirectly got involved they sold weapons to what is now ISIS and the Taliban back in the 80s. When the Soviets were in Afghanistan, they funded the rebels, and the rebels won, but those rebels then became the enemies of the United States, and they have all their good weapons. Yeah. So, Classic. In the short term, was it a good thing? Maybe. In long term, unintended consequences, now you have these rebels who at one point in time were on your side, and now they're actively fighting against you.
Yeah.
That
reminds me of all over the world, I imagine, with the settlers came introduction of certain species that are now massive problems, and it comes from not knowing the whole picture. So you're just like, there's too many I don't know why there's too much of this weed here, and we go, in England this animal eats this weed, or this bug eats this weed, and introduce it, all good, and now the bug's a problem. And now the bug's so not knowing the full scope of all the information you can get, which you never can really as a human. I don't think you can never understand. It's like the butterfly effect. You can't get everything down to a T, but sometimes that's an example of intervention, war, or introducing species. It can be a lot worse than if you just did nothing.
Yeah, and you can even if we don't say that it's worse, it's just that there's not going to be a happy outcome either way.
Yeah,
and an example closer to home is New Zealand, and a specific example of this was when in the 2017 election, when Winston Peters was kingmaker or whatever. Part of that, he got this massive allotment of money. It was at least $1 billion, if not more than $1 billion. It was just like Jesus. A Pacific Islands fund. It was to whatever his pet projects in the Pacific Islands, and we know all the problems that New Zealand has, as nearly every country has, but I don't think that we should be giving money to other countries as much as they might need it if we're not already near picture perfect in New Zealand.
It's the same thing.
You just have to focus on the people closest to you, and that's what I mean. There's an infinite number of problems in the world. How do you decide? Because they're our neighbour, but it's like, are they more important than the people struggling in New Zealand? Let's fix the problems in New Zealand.
That's and if everyone did that in their own local communities, then everything would be fine anyway. And
nothing would ever be perfect, I think that's what I mean. And I think that's traditionally how humans lived before we became globalized.
It brings to mind the dole and for single mother payments. If there was none, so that's effectively where our tax dollars get real centralized, and then it's effectively taken far away. I don't know any mum who's can't afford to live, recently divorced or something, has no income. If there was none of that, you would feel a conscience. If it was your neighbor who's just been divorced, has a kid, and has no job, you'd be like, come stay with us or whatever. So that's the example of when you'd be for a while at least. And a lot of the times now when the government pays them, some people say it incentivizes single mothers. I think it's a bit too cynical, but it can often make the problem worse again.
That I could bring up around that.
Yeah, my point is just it can make the problem worse, where it sometimes may incentivize that. I don't think it's really an incentive, but it can also instill a attitude of apatheticness, to life. They're like, I don't need to get a job because government's looking after me.
Well, yeah, this person I knew. Probably a couple of years. I don't know the full ins and outs of how the payment system works, so I'll just put that out there first. But this person I know had a young baby child, and I was talking to her. I said, how many hours do you work a week? She said, I can only work 10 hours because if I work more than 10 hours, then I lose this payment. And I was like, if you don't mind me asking, how much do you get? Just curious. I think it was close to where if I was working probably, bear in mind this is a relatively low income job, but at the time I'm working 30 hours or 30 between 30 and 40 hours for this woman to get the same amount, and she's capped at 10 because...
And you're saying you got roughly the same amount of
money. It's to me, it's a situational thing, because if you obviously have had a baby and you need to take
Yeah,
care if they're young. And I'm not saying, that all new mothers should just go straight back into working 40 hours a week or whatever. But when you hear of certain situations, and it's natural to like draw comparisons where it's like, what is the point of me doing this when other people can effectively not do as much but still gain reward from it?
Yeah.
And I mean it's a difficult one. Maybe it's just my own thing I need to get over. And I've never been on like the dole or whatever, so like I can't speak for people who are. But then it gets thrown under like, are these people actually looking for jobs, or are, people trying? But I like to think that if it happened to me and I found times of hardship, my first thing would be to try and get back on the ladder like straight away.
Yeah, it's just gonna incentivize different people differently.
Yeah.
And again, it's exactly what we're talking about with some interventions. It's like not better or worse, but it's like inefficient. Maybe is the right word to describe it. I want to ask you guys about intervening in. Speaking of intervention, when it's in your immediate surroundings, intervening in, say, like close friends or family interpersonal issues, when you want to, if you see like a clear bad habit being played out between your mum and dad, or like an abusive relationship between a friend and their partner, where do you draw the line for intervening in something like that? Or like a drinking, like one of your friends has kind of a low-key drinking or drug abuse problem.
And
it's none of your business, but is it your business?
It's just one of the it's so
very
messy.
Circumstantial, I suppose. Individual.
Again, I'm gonna be leaning on not
stay out of it.
Yeah,
I just don't want to be a part of this, because
when does it work? Even if you have good intention, I guess maybe one famous example would be Steve-O with the intervention with the Jackass guys with his. So I guess maybe it can work, but generally I don't think it works either. Oh, you've got a drinking problem or whatever. And it sparks their defense mechanism with, oh, no, I don't, or I just enjoy drinking, whatever. Yeah. And then that just makes them dig their heels in.
I think you're right.
I think, there's a way of going about it. Yeah, we're maybe not doing nothing, but very like subtly, hey, do you want to come out on a run tonight, or go for a walk tonight, go to the movies tonight, when you know that normally at home getting hammered on a Saturday night? Just try and subtly Or another
one that would be real common that a lot of people will relate to is like weight. Like when someone's getting to like an unhealthy weight, and you're like, is this... You feel,
particularly in the age of body positivity.
Yeah.
Again, I think the best way of going about it is
it none of your business at all?
Technically it's not, because everyone has a right to do whatever the hell they want, but of course you don't want to see,
your close friends like fall apart.
I think it has to be, again, in a subtle way, like, hey, do you want to come out, do you want to come out for a walk? And then, like, do you want to come over to my house for dinner, and kind of maybe like instruct them on a way to maybe
just serve them like 3 lettuce leaves.
I might try and take a different approach to this, but I think if your intentions are well and your intentions are good because you care about this person, maybe for me, like, it's not to fully ridicule them and like throw them under a bus or whatever, like figuratively, telling them what to do. But if you are starting to see patterns and noticing, so maybe example of like if someone who's got like a full-blown gambling problem, it's more about the approach as to how you would do it. So not saying, hey, I think you should stop gambling, but it's like, I don't know, maybe like Dave was saying, invite them along, hey, let's watch the game together. Or, that's probably not the best example. But
it's going to take a real subtle social
It's one of those things where you just need to approach it in the right way, because understandably they might dig their heels in, and at that point, maybe I'll just take a step back and leave them to do with it. But then maybe to offer that secondary, like, okay, this, or like if you want to continue how you're doing, maybe not say it that way, but I'm here for you when you're ready to take the next
that's
step.
a good way of putting
That's what I was
it,
going to say. Is like I think I'd say just enough to let them know that I'm thinking about it. I maybe ask like, yeah, you're all good with your you're all good with your like gambling, like you have fun with it, like it's not like stressful or anything. And they'll be like, yeah, sweet. And you're like, oh, sick, man, just like, all good. Or I'll be like, I don't know how to approach about the weight. But the drugs, drinking and drugs, shouldn't separate the two. Drug use, yeah, like I don't know. You haven't like you enjoy drinking a lot, all good, fair enough. Just so you know that maybe you're showing them that you're aware of it.
And just be like, if you ever want to do something else, get hammered on a Saturday night, just give me a call and we can, whatever, go to the movies.
But hey,
that's
I noticed you said last time that you were never going to drink again, and I saw you on your Instagram story out drinking. Like, are you all good, man?
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of social campaigns about that, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
You know? Like the check if your old neighbour's all right is the latest one.
It's just a balance.
It's a shame that you have to be reminded about how to be basically human in a community because we're not encouraged to learn that anymore. So it has to kind of be forced from top down. It's like, hey, remember, it's a nice thing to check in on your elderly neighbour if you haven't heard from them in a week. So people shouldn't really have to be reminded to do that, but I suppose we're just so busy we don't notice otherwise.
Yeah,
you think?
I mean, I don't live next to any elderly people, but I guess that's a fair assumption. I mean, maybe that's a thing for me. Like I used to have this thought when I get older, you know, just naturally it seems you just become more lonely over time. I think I see it in my grandmother, you know, like she used to go out a lot. She was quite independent, which is a good thing, you know, in an older age. She'd be able to bus across town. I think she still does, but struggles with it. But ever since COVID, it's completely like flipped a switch where she's like too afraid to do anything or, even
would you hit her up about it? Be like, do you miss going out?
Well, possibly. So, maybe it's a cultural thing, but a lot of the times when we make family plans, example, going out for lunch, it's you try and cater to, like my grandmother, for example, like where it's easier for her to eat, or you know, because it's not easy to eat a steak that's or whatever. Or like when my niece and nephew were growing up, it was about the kids. You know, because where's a place that has a playground or whatever. So in that sense, it's like if they're not wanting to, like my grandmother, for example, keeps turning down coming out for birthday dinners or coming over. It's like, well, you can only do so much, and to the point where maybe it's just up to us to visit her in person. Alone.
You reminded me before when you were talking about, I can't remember what you're talking about, but intervention with Steve-O. I was like, I think it has to come from them. So sometimes you trying to do something or like just removing, say, all the bad food in the house, then they haven't learned any lesson. So it's gonna either rebound back the exact same way or it's gonna transform into something else. Like people have drug problems for a reason. The drugs are giving them something that they're not getting somewhere else. Which is usually like connection. I think is probably the general term for that. Anything else? I forgot what I was going with that. But
I just think just to sort of wrap that up. For the most part, you know, I'm generally a person who thinks, you know, let people do what they want so long as you're not harming or hurting other people. But then it's like a balance thing, because if it's people who you really care about, you obviously just don't want to see them fall apart. And I've seen friends in the past who continue to just fall down the same habits and do the same things over and over again. And I don't want to see it happen. So in that sense, it's like maybe it's up to me to put a boundary out where I'm like, okay, just not going to see this person anymore, which sucks because you care about them, but then you can only do so much until it's up to them to like take that step or take the help. And if they do, I think kudos to them,
Yeah.
like they're actually wanting to change.
Yeah. And then you're there waiting for
And
them
then-
to help support them.
Well, and then they might have a relapse, but it's about how they, like, a lot of people say inevitably, like, for example, if you're an alcoholic or recovering alcoholic, you're pretty likely to have a relapse. So not like condemning or judging them, but then seeing like how they would then go on after that.
Yeah.
And if it's a habit that keeps forming, well, you don't want to start becoming an enabler.
Yeah, I think it's also being proven slowly with the like emerging psychedelic research, where it does take like a radical like internal change in how you view life because that's where they're finding the biggest success rates with like ibogaine, with the alcohol and whatnot. It's like a psychedelic experience, and that is the best, like, almost the best way to have. And Alcoholics Anonymous has like Christian roots, and so that's, I think, credited with it's the most successful program to get off alcohol, Alcoholics Anonymous, and it has a Christian background, and so yeah, obviously religion, Christian, has a lot of internal significance that can change your life, and that's not a coincidence as to why it's the most effective way to change addiction like that.
I mean, that is one way you could look at it. I don't know how that works, because it can become like a cynical thing where, say, if someone will take like Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, or someone who's an alcoholic trying to recover. Yeah, I do. I think I agree with you to the point where it's an internal thing and the need to change. But then I don't necessarily think it's the best. Well, maybe it depends what it is, to try and replace something with something else.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Like replacing alcohol with
Yeah,
religion.
because it depends how you approach it.
Yeah.
I know, like, I've heard some people who recover from alcoholism and end up taking up running because it's like, so it can work and it can have its things, but I mean, I don't know. I've seen too many people who let's say like find religion, it's like their scapegoat for it, but it's like you've actually got to.
I've seen one dude.
That's a good point.
You've got to. You've really, like, I don't know. It's the hardest. Trying to articulate. It's really hard to articulate. But I don't know if whatever you believe, like, I wouldn't say for me, if I was an alcoholic, I believe because, this is taking up the time now. I go to church to stop drinking. It's like, no,
a distraction.
Yeah, it's a distraction, as opposed to like the real why you actually do it, or follow a religion or whatever.
Well,
I know that's probably not the best
if
explanation.
it's connection and community is the reason why you're doing drugs, but I think is a big reason why people do, then church is a community.
Yeah.
So that, I know what you mean though. It's like you don't want to. It can be a good thing just to replace it, because that's maybe what everyone needs anyway. Yeah. Yeah. What were you gonna say, David?
It's a little bit different, but a bit of a radical take on addiction, whatever the addiction be. I think, and so this is not going away from trying an intervention. This is just speaking about someone who's an addict. I tend, it's a very radical approach, but I think like get it out of your system. Just go.
It's like when you just want a kid to stop eating candy, you just feed them heaps of candy and they vomit and they
and I do believe that I have read that most addicts, and it's just addicts in general, I think drugs in general, most addicts do eventually quit. So that's it. They probably just naturally stumble upon, whatever it is, a new goal in life. Of course, when you think of addict, you think of, they all just end up on the street, the stereotypical addict that we can all think of. But I think those are actually a minority. Mm-hmm. The majority are, people who go through this, probably in many cases, their 20s, early 30s, like a Steve-O, and go, I guess in his case, he wasn't intervention. But I do believe I've read this, so I should refresh my memory and check the actual stats on it. But something, people just, they get it out of their system essentially. And it's probably a case of just naturally stumbling upon a new endeavor in life that it's like,
suggesting like you kind of need to hit rock bottom to see
And
to
you
go
don't even.
upwards.
I don't even think you have to hit rock bottom, because again, I think that we'll probably associate addiction. It all leads there. Whereas there's plenty, I believe, of addicts, high functioning ones, where they're addicts, but they can hold down a job or whatever sort of thing, and something just naturally changes over time, where it's like, oh, I'm bored of this.
Yeah.
I don't feel the need to do this. Probably because they've met someone, or you've found a new job, found a new endeavor that they really enjoy, and it just naturally fades out over time. Because I think the people, and I can't say that they're wrong to take this approach, but the people who have the intervention, whatever, go to Alcoholics Anonymous or rehab, there's always going to be that burning ember within them.
I think it's still like less than half. Like, it's the most successful way to get off alcohol, but I think it's still like less than half.
But even the ones that we say that are currently successful, they can't go to bars, they can't be because there's just that ember there where they know that if they have one drink, they're going to have 100 drinks and they're going to be full-blown addicts again.
Is it the ember, or is it the snow groove in your brain that is just like, you're falling slowly into that?
Whatever it is, it's something that's there.
Yeah.
And I would hate to go through life with that feeling inside me, knowing that I have to constantly be, it's like willpower, and you're constantly on red alert. I can't come to that event because there's going to be alcohol and all of that. I think
like crossing the road when you see someone smoking.
That must
always
suck.
Fighting against yourself.
Always fighting against yourself. It's like, so you've got it under control, but are you really free? It's like now you're a slave to your abstinence.
Yeah.
So I can't fault anyone if that's the approach they're taking, but that wouldn't work for me.
No,
I'd much rather
I
just
agree.
get it out of my system.
Yeah.
I hope, and hopefully, because I say that's not a surefire method to work, because that can end up where you just drink yourself to death or whatever.
Yes.
But
That's a
I
good
think,
point.
in many cases, that's not what happens. I think people just grow up, they get bored of it, they find new responsibilities, new endeavors, whatever it is, and it naturally trickles out.
I think when you think about a drug addict, and you think, I think you would all agree that they would say, or they feel like they need the drug, or they need so and so. But I think just like we would all also agree that everyone needs community and connection. It's not a drug. So like what you're saying, where you don't want to just replace it with something else, but I think no matter what, you need connection as a person. So whether you're getting it from meth, crystal meth, or a church is up to you, but also, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but also,
so I think the natural or healthy way or sustainable way of going about that would be that you're an alcoholic and you just start going to church while you're an alcoholic and you keep drinking, and then over a course of a year, 2 years, 5 years,
that's a strap.
Build yourself up within the community. You get your network grows and grows. It'll just fizzle out. It'll in all likelihood fizzle out, because it's like you haven't gone there. You've gone there while you're still an alcoholic. You haven't gone there to replace it.
That's a good hypothesis.
It's an interesting way to look at it, because for me, as someone who I regularly will go to church, and there are people who, I don't know, this isn't the best way to refer to them, but you'd call them as like the fringe people, like kind of on the
not regulars,
or side of society, the wrong side of society. So you'd class that as people who are off the street or drink, drinking a lot, that sort of thing. They're still loved and welcome to the church, but they kind of need more. I guess the right word to it is more like pastoring, or they need more care. And that's probably like one of the safest places you can go to get that, because unless you're like full blown like going to church drunk and causing a scene, like you're not going to get thrown out or anything. And in that sense, like you'd meet people and develop community. And then I guess like referring back to where it's about yourself wanting to change, well then you've also got that accountability if you've got people in your community So I know this is a good example, but like regularly, you know, we meet up pretty much every week to just chat and yarn, see how we're all doing. And then I also have friends or a group of people that I'll see once a fortnight where we just, you know, keep up and touch base with each other when people are struggling. Like you've got that support there. But then there's that balance. Well, then do we intervene unless the person wants that intervention? So if you've got someone coming off the street who wants to come to church or whatever, and you know, is willing to change, well, then that is going to be there for you. But if you're like, yeah, I think
if you're like dragging someone like, come to church, come on, and they don't really want to, it's not going to work. Well, it might work, but
well, I mean, maybe that's not fully what I'm trying to say. It's kind of hard to articulate, but like, Dave was saying, you can't really replace it. It's got to be like natural progression. So there maybe have been, trying to remember, like people who've come in off the street who over time, like the more they come and the more they have people there that like welcome them and see them in, then naturally you'll see them like their trajectory is going upwards because they're wanting.
You can see it.
You can see you see natural change. And I think that's the same with like my wife who works in mental health. Like those are some of the people who you would argue are the most lost or on the fringe of society, who still like would deserve the care that, you know, everyone else cares for. It's harder for them. But she's even said that over time, some of them, there'll be some who obviously, but you'll see their progression over time, and it's like one of the most rewarding things you can see because you're actually seeing it play out firsthand. Yeah,
and it's probably, sounds like what you're saying, it's quite obvious. Like you're saying, it's like obvious to see when someone's clearly getting better or enjoying themselves more. I probably agree.
I'll bring this up anyway because, you know, I think this is probably like a safe place to bring it up. But I think I started noticing with David in the past where he would constantly like turn down social events and like you would offer, hey, you want to come along? It's like, nah. And I'm not like say, you know, you do what you like.
It's correct.
But then it's like, I very well probably could have just cut to like, well, I've invited you to 5-10 different things and you don't want to come. But I think you've even noticed yourself like the need to like have community. And there's always that say like, you know, you've got to actually put the work into it to want to do it. So I'd say I commend you for that.
Yeah. We
100% correct.
This often feels like therapy, and I wanted to mention about therapy as it's becoming more normalized. There's ads, there's BetterHelp, there's all the mainstream ads.
That's the first thing when you said that, I was like, contact BetterHelp.
Yeah. It's becoming very I mean, it seems like in America, more the liberal culture, it's very normalized. It's like, everyone goes to their therapist once a week, and it's not. They're saying it's not. There's no stigma to it. It's not shameful. I think it's it's an unfortunate probably necessity nowadays, in that it's not immediately obvious or encouraged to go check in, like I used the example before of checking in your old elderly neighbour if you haven't seen them or the light's been on for 2 days. Because in the same way, therapy I think is unfortunately necessary nowadays, whether it's in this form, but most people don't do this. Going to a professional. So I feel like back in a more community focused old school days, the community was your therapy all the time. Like you're constantly getting therapy by being around, by doing this on a bigger scale, but still not giant scale, still a local community. But I think it's probably an unfortunate. There's still something icky about it paying like as a professional to get that, like that's something that shouldn't be really monetized, I feel.
That's true.
But it's what else are you going to do? If you're working 9 to 5, 40 hours a week.
I used to have the like thought, and maybe it's just because of like movies and TV, when you think of therapy as like someone lying down on the couch while therapist is taking notes or whatever. I have gone maybe a handful of times and found it useful because it was like more, as hard as it is, like it's opening yourself up to your like own emotions and like understanding why you do, trying to understand why you do things and like how you can change that. And I mean, I don't knock it. I think it's probably
I think way more people need whether I don't think I've been to therapy specifically. I went to counselling in that first year or so out of school.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's kind of a theory. But then I went
to
to psychiatrist, which is, I guess, that's kind of like the ultimate form of
it's all the
that's
same.
the very highest
it's all on the
level.
same page. Like
it's all
therapy,
talking to a professional about your mental health. Obviously for me it was because I'd long suspected that I had ADHD. I only went the once, although I'm always thinking I should go back again because I feel like I would get so much more out of it because I understand myself so much more than I did the first time I went. But it's just, I might do that at some point. It's always an option on the table. But that certainly has led me to reinvent myself over the past, what is it now? I think it was 2021, mid 2021, so 18 months or so. And I would put that down as probably the most significant event in my life because, reinvent myself.
Cool. Sick, man. That's great.
I was
Great
saying,
news.
I was going to touch base on that because I think in modern day society, like you think of therapy can be a lot of things, like, you're just meeting out with friends or catching up with a coffee. And I think that has its place in the spectrum, but then also like professional services do have their place as well. And I think there's probably a lot of resources out there if you need them. Like there's probably going to be an infinite amount, like food banks, for example, which are great. There's all sorts of things for like budgeting, for example, if you don't know how to budget or, you're a constant overspender or in debt or whatever. It's all about just seeking it for yourself, I guess.
I think going to like the professional for the first time, whether it be a singular event or a but as the initial step, and then it could be that it'd be like this where your friends can be the therapy that you need.
Yeah.
But if you've got like a lifetime's worth of baggage, or not even a lifetime, just years of baggage to go and get that professional assessment, I think that's for most people is a very good step. And then
I'd agree.
as I say now, although I think would get value of going out to see a psychiatrist again. It certainly doesn't feel completely necessary. It'd just be I could do that and I could probably get something out of it. But whereas it was like a burning desire back in 2021 where it's like, I need to do this. Whereas like now, as I say, I'm getting way better at communicating my emotions, my feelings, my weaknesses, all my strengths, all of that, and just being a better person. So for the most part, I'm starting to build up a good community where I can survive.
That's bussin'.
It is because I think most people, especially probably men our age, most will never get to that point, and that is why they end up with, whether it's not be a full-blown addiction but unhealthy coping habits where their therapy is getting wasted. And this is my therapy, was getting wasted. And in that way, then you can be vulnerable. Now we can talk about our feelings because
you've got to take a drink to knock off the ice or whatever.
Break the ice.
There must have been so much. So I definitely agree. The professionals have their place. You guys are making me realize, because I mean, not even just our parents' generation. There must have been large swaths of the population who just never got over their like childhood traumas.
That's a fantastic point.
There's only so much.
We're
not professionals, so there's only so much we can do. But people for the longest time, until professional therapists were a thing, very recent in human history, must have just like repressed that. They would have been, there would have been addictions back in the day. Domestic abuse was normal. That's an issue. That's like an insecurity. That's something you're not, like if you're committing domestic abuse, you've got some kind of issue that you need to go to a therapist about.
I think, for sure. And I think that's often where people won't recognize it, whether it be themselves or people around them won't recognize it, that whether it be as extreme as domestic violence or whether it just be anger issues that aren't actually leading to physical violence against others, but just rage within, they don't recognize. They just think, oh, that's an angry person. But it's like they're angry for a reason, and it's very likely that.
I like it. It gives me great optimism, because I think to get real like new agey. I feel like it's a real good thing for like, collective humanity, all of us individually and culturally. It's way way more normal now to talk about mental health and whatnot. But like all kind of, I think I believe in generational trauma. So I think you get things from your previous generations all the way back to ancient humans. Yeah. And I feel like we're kind of untangling it now. We're doing a service to our great ancestors by talking about our feelings.
From my experience anyway, like from going, I did notice things pop up that I had no thought in my mind whatsoever, like, and then as soon as they, like, it just hashes something in you that brings up like such an emotional, I mean, I probably don't particularly want to share, but yeah, like a certain event in my life which I thought like I'd gotten over, and then to the point where you fully like unraveled. And I think the person used the example of like the roots, like if you're trying to kill roots or whatever, you might go so far, but if you don't go deep to the bottom, that they will just eventually keep rebuilding.
That's a cool metaphor.
Yeah. So another person, I don't know if you've heard of, is it Dr. Gabor
Mate?
Yeah.
He's the man. He's epic.
Having listened to one of his podcasts he was a guest on, like, makes you really think about like certain events in your life and childhood events that can absolutely like shape you and affect your future children and children's children over time.
Yeah.
It's quite
epic.
Hard.
I think that's a really important point. I think we kind of touched on it in the relationships episode, but it's something that I'm starting to recognize more and more, because I've always heard it thrown around, your parents and your upbringing is, you become, you take whatever your adult form is because of who you were as a child. And I was like, but I had a happy childhood. That's what I always thought. So I was like, that doesn't really explain, why I have these certain weaknesses, perceived weaknesses and stuff like that. But now it's starting to make sense. And I certainly can't complain. I had a good childhood, but that's right. Our parents were flawed people. And you say the things like, well, again, I can only speak for my parents, but revealing emotion, expressing feelings, that was just off the table sort of thing. That wasn't a thing. And now it really makes sense as to why I have those struggles.
Yeah.
But I can appreciate again that my parents, it would have been because of their parents who had those same flaws, weak, whatever you want to call them, characteristics, and they just absorbed them. And especially considering the much less education that they had access to, like I say, we have all these great people we can watch YouTube videos of to educate ourselves. They didn't have that. So they were going in blind and then, passing on. And as I say, especially in my case, and my parents both came from like super ultra conservative Catholic families. And not to say that the Catholic religion is bad, but it was like the hardcore. My mum's, I've heard her talk about it, and she would get benefit out of going to therapy. She still says that she has nightmares about like the nuns, and they used to tell her that I've heard a story, I forget exactly how it goes, where they said you have to like sleep like this at night or something will...
For those listening, crossing your arms over your chest like a vampire?
Something to do with that I forget what it was, but something... It might have even been something unnatural, as horrific as something like you'll be raped if you didn't do this. It's something I can't, but it was something very horrible. And this is when she was a young child. I don't know exactly, but like 8 or something. And that the
fact
could
affect you for till
exactly
decades later.
And and just with the way, and again, I won't pin it solely on the Catholic religion, but I do think back then it was far less like open than it is today. But even if we just say that it was just ultra conservative parents, it's like, I can imagine that feelings and all of that, none of that would have been talked about. And so, you can see.
Yeah, because the term generational trauma has like a real woo-woo, like new agey.
I know what you mean.
If you can easily rationalize it, and I had a taste of it with my grandmother after she passed. Recently, she wrote. I might have mentioned it before. She had a memoir. I don't know if it's not on the podcast. Taylor's son. She has a memoir that she didn't want anyone to read. I don't know if I mentioned this before. Until she died, and she'd lived through. She was in she's Dutch from Holland, lived through World War II. Like very traumatic. Like her siblings died from starvation in front of her. But it made me something clicked when I read it as well, because her appreciation, her entire worldview about money, because they were desperately poor, they couldn't afford food, was completely like determined by that trauma, and then through that bleeds. It kind of diffuses, like you were saying with your mum's mum. She's not as strict as her mum. It's kind of diffused.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it gets a bit more chill.
It gets a little bit better each time with each generation.
If you do the work. But yeah, so that is a very superficial example, but just the attitude towards money, very what you'd say stingy, as a lot of grandparents are called now, stingy, but they have a completely different experience with money, and then bleed through to dad and now to me, which is slightly less again.
Yeah.
And so generational trauma makes complete sense. Her parents again. I mean, everyone was poor back three generations.
I agree
so money
with you.
had a different
100% know that term generational trauma. I've seen that thrown around for
years
now.
It's a bit wanky.
I agree, but I do agree.
It shouldn't be.
I think the problem is because a lot of people who use that term are the ones who really play like the victim. We can, to throw it out there, your woke SJW, whatever. That they're the ones that are often throwing that term around. And look, maybe I just need to expand. Maybe they've got points and things like that. But it feels like people they just want to play victim rather than say it is what it is. I recognize that's the what. I understand that. It was my parents did the best they could. Hopefully, and they were flawed, but I can appreciate it was because they were going in blind. So I'm not gonna be like,
that's the tension that's the cause of the tension around in America with the reparations, but also Treaty of Waitangi stuff in New Zealand. It's that kind of, it's like, we all know, but can we move on now? But
exactly.
Like, you're coming from a place of massive privilege, you can't say that. Anyway, that gets messy.
Really messy.
That's a secret.
But you do have to, and I've gotten more empathetic, proud to say it, tooting my own horn here, to be more empathetic towards talking about generational trauma with slavery, because it's not that long ago. So if you believe in generational trauma from from your grandmother, go back just one more generation, and they had immense trauma, obviously. That's not that far off. But still, it's no excuse. It's not, you don't want to be a victim, but it's you got to have a appreciation.
Yeah,
for
I
that
agree.
Stuff as well.
I think the problem is whether it be we're talking about black people who are descendants of slaves, or just people suffering whatever their own personal traumas from their upbringing. I think the problem is that most people get stuck on just wanting to be victims. And I get, that is the
massive generalization, though.
That is,
and the loudest, there's a loud minority that are like annoying.
That might be fair, but I still do feel like it's a majority, because I think that's the natural reaction. I think the human reaction is to say, my parents were useless, or my grandparents were slaves, therefore my life is screwed.
Yeah,
and that's I think that is the natural human instinct, is just want to say,
Yeah.
So
my partner has epitomizes this opinion excellently, I think, when she says, like, just because your parents physically abused each other, it doesn't mean you keep going and doing it. So it's obviously not a good thing.
I think it's a case of recognizing it and saying, now I understand. Yeah, I've inherited these flaws or whatever, this trauma, but it is what it is. I think that's the only way to because otherwise you do get stuck in this perpetual victimhood. Give me more money, give me more, and then you just create it's another form of slavery where you become reliant upon people uplifting you rather than you moving forward in the world yourself.
See, I think that opinion is the majority of people. I genuinely think the majority of people are like, get on with it. I think it's a real vocal minority.
Yeah, you could be right.
I reckon it's a silent majority.
You could be right.
That are like real reasonable. No one not racist as you'd expect. Like half of America. If you listen to just the news, you'd expect. And from an alien's perspective, you'd say, it seems like half of America are like outright racist.
Yeah, I mean, it was
definitely not
a topic. If you don't want to go into like the culture war, but I think over a period of time, when something goes, like, it's like a pendulum, when it goes so far one way, Like if it goes right to the end, well, it's going to come back faster the other. So it's kind of like that balance of going back and forth. And then when you start having such extreme, thoughts or ideologies, over time, I think most people think, well, that's actually not that good for society, but you become too like shy or afraid to speak out. But the more people who, when we think something is stupid, like it'll eventually make its way back to I guess you could say normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's an accurate assessment.
This stuff, I think we all agree, massively interesting, real open, and happy to have my mind changed on this, and as we all are, speak for all of us, because it's everyone has an opinion on this. I think a strong opinion.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Final thoughts. Time.
We're at 1 hour. Yep. Just 1 hour 5 minutes. So probably get to wrapping up.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is I don't know how to wrap it up into a single way, but you find a way to be, or you find out who you really are. I think, because I don't think most people reach that point, and it's very hard.
How do you do that? So you recommend going to a professional?
Well,
even if you don't think you have any issues.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that, because I don't think most people realize how complicated we are. I think a lot of people sort of just dumb themselves down and think, oh yeah, this is the way life works, this is who I am. They don't ever really scratch below the surface. And so maybe a good example is like if I took myself back to when I was, young. I can't pick out a specific age, but maybe say like 10 or something. I think the idea of like depression or anxiety hadn't really crossed my mind. I was just happy, watch Dragon Ball Z, play Yu-Gi-Oh cards, things like that. It was simple, and and you could go, if you could have that state of mind with simple pleasures and whatever, you could go through life like that and that would be fine. But then as I got older, things got more complicated. But now I'm really figuring out what makes me tick, who I am, how to communicate is a big one for me, because that's always been a weakness of mine, communicating. And I just have this different feelings. It's like, geez, like I really understand who I am and how I operate, and it just feels like really good, and like sustainable. I'd much rather that than just be.
It's a clean buzz.
Yeah, it's a very clean buzz, rather than even if I could just be this seemingly happy person that hasn't. Because maybe those people do exist. Like my mum seems to act like that, where she's like, she views like these terms as like depression as like they're just phases and stuff. But I suspect that there's something deeper going on below the surface.
I think this is just white culture. Is that I think a lot of the frustration and tension that come towards white people, is that we kind of do have a lot of us probably do live with those like blinders on. We're like everything is awesome, and we like and we have that. We do have an advantage. We have a generational advantage,
and I think it's especially true for white men.
Yeah, and it'd be so frustrating. It's like, do your work, man.
Again, I can only speak for myself, but I
need
think
to do more work.
If you get to really, it's just the feeling of self-confidence I have now. And it's still, I'm very early on my journey, but it feels as say like a sustainable source of self-confidence. Where maybe another example would be as a teenager,
like self-sourcing pudding.
Whereas, And so maybe that's the way of putting it. It's an internal self-confidence. Where in the past, as a teenager, I was terribly insecure, but I could temporarily get external confidence. I think gave you the example last night where, mates egged me on to go up and talk to a chick in the mall. And temporarily you feel like the man, but it's not a sustainable source of confidence.
I think sustainable is the great word because it implies that it's going to keep going. It has to keep going. And and
it's I can only speak for myself, but I've since early teenagehood, I've always been extremely self-conscious, lacking confidence, even though I say I may have appeared externally confident, and that's been me all the way through my 20s until, and I say I'm very early in my journey where
that's how I feel. Got ages to go.
Yeah, so it's pretty epic feeling, and I think there'll be a lot of humans, maybe more so men, but humans in general that would benefit from getting on that.
I think that's where the desire, the self-improvement trend has come from. It's the knowledge that you have got ages more to go. So you're like, well, what next? And then you're trying to fix.
Yep.
That's probably the stingy way to do it, is watching YouTube videos. You're trying to get what a professional therapist will probably do for you for free.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think that's me.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. I think kind of touching on what David said, a similar experience where you're going on your own journey of trying to better and understand yourself. Like, I've noticed myself in times where I'd become like instantly frustrated, usually. Like, it's more like catching yourself before it actually happens. And that's like when that starts happening. And obviously it's still a journey. It's not like I've got it down to a T, but often like my first instinct or mechanism was to go straight up into defensiveness, like, oh man, they're like out, like trying to get out to get me. And I think I knew that came from like my upbringing and my family, where it's like I see it in my dad when my mum would ask him to do something, it was like, oh, you said you wanted to do, you know. And it's like that's where I think I developed that thing from, where it's like, no, like you kind of just have to. And often like blunt, when people are like blunt to you, is like, man, that's like real rude. And it's like, well, no, they probably actually know what they want and they're just assertive. Like, whereas I'm insecure and I struggle to even like, you know, say what I want, and that's another thing going through. Like today, as an example, got a coffee at a cafe which tasted real bitter. Like this needed like just a little bit more milk, and I was like, man, I just don't want to be like a dick, you know. Hey, is it all right if I get just a little extra milk? It's just not up to my taste. And he's like, yeah, man, sure. It's like, well, that's not actually that hard to do. It's just got to get over those initial humps.
Yeah. There will be a bit better place if everyone as
knew what they
enlightened
want
as us.
just, no, I wouldn't say that.
No,
you know,
but if everyone has the goal of getting enlightened.
I think that's an important point, though, because I'm exactly the same. And again, it would have been rooted in the way, and not to solely pin it on my parents, but just whatever my natural development at school. And I think it's also a common characteristic of people with ADHD is, like people pleasing. So that's a form of people pleasing. I won't say anything because that's like a defense mechanism where if I don't criticize not the right word, but if I don't confront anyone, even if it's about the most minor of details that they wouldn't take offense to, they'll like me then. And it's actually
it's counterproductive, intuitive, whatever.
Because that's it. In most cases, or almost all cases, they won't take offense to it, and in fact they'll be happy that it's like the classic case, I think, is or very similar to that. You get handed food
that tastes awful.
And I'm thinking more so just at home rather than a restaurant. And you could lie and be like,
Mom, this fucking sucks.
Obviously there's a right way to go about it, but it's actually much nicer to be like, oh, I don't like it, or this is a little bit off, rather than lying about it and having them, keep going through life thinking that they're making it the perfect way or whatever, and actually they're not. It'll be they'd feel way better if you're like, oh, it's a little bit too salty. Next time they fix that, and you're like, oh, thanks.
Yeah,
that's great.
There was one. They heated up food from the cabinet and the middle was cold, and I said like, hey, this was actually really good, but maybe for next time I would recommend heating it up for an extra 10-15 seconds, because then the next person's going to get that benefit.
On those line notes.
I think just the final thing that I'd probably summarize was like the importance of intervening for yourself, and saying that, like, reflecting on your old self, and like, I don't know, if you write a diary or whatever, you can see and look back for yourself how you've changed over time. But
What's the quote that comes to mind is you don't want to compare yourself to anyone else. Just be
Yeah.
better than the
just
person you were yesterday.
yeah, or it's like you just
It's true.
Yeah, that's
It's
I
good
guess what I'm
cereal
saying.
box wisdom.
You over time, I think as we get older, like you'll hash out and bury those old habits and old flaws, and
I can tell it's a clean buzz. We're all on that. When we talk about this, we're all on the same clean buzz, and you just want everyone to experience it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
but
don't intervene too much.
No. Let people have their what's the word? No, it's not anonymity. No, it's like
Autonomy.
Yeah, autonomy. That's right. Yeah, you got to let people have their autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there for this week of counselling, Friday Counsel, and we will see you next time. Peace out.
So
Deuces.